Snurfers, 60s. Yep, the beginning of snowboarding right there. Part of the old board collection.
I'd have to say the progression of snowboarding kinda got stalled out a little bit through the boots and the bindings and the boards itself.
We just knew that the equipment wasn't working in certain ways.
You're riding what was given to you. You know, it was given to you, so it's like, ride on. That's what I got to ride.
You could only do what the, equipment would kind of let you.
Boards were just so big and heavy.
And we thought if we took the fins off, we're just going to spin circles down the hill.
Snowboards had fins on them? How stupid.
1983, my first board I ever bought right here, 50 bucks. Probably 20 of us out riding, mostly up at Mount Rose, hiking, riding POW.
You just had to modify every board that you came across.
I seen that 1400 FE Sims. Fast X bindings. Down in Carson City at the snowboard shop, and I wanted that so bad. So I made my own snowboard out of plywood. I just mounted these two little billet pieces of aluminum and cut out bicycle BMX tubes, and then I made these fins out of L-shaped steel.
You had about 2 inches of tail behind your back foot. You couldn't go 540 to fakie because it would just auger in.
Once the board started changing, everybody started changing.
One of the first big evolutions I saw in the sport was a twin-tip board.
And as soon as that happened, everything changed in snowboarding.
A lot of ingenuity and ideas, I think, came out of the West Coast. Tour 88. Yeah, that was a time when fakie riding became in.
And then the whole switch evolution came on. Although when it first hit, I think it was called fakie, not switch, excuse me.
The gear was evolving, we were evolving.
You know, when the equipment got better, you were able to do more.
In the old days, remember, everything was based on skiing.
We came up with this design, more of a ski design with a flat tail. We copied, and the side cut like a ski, real straight, and a big nose for POW.
The progression of the bindings was probably the worst part of history of snowboarding.
Half the time when you were going off a jump, you were chasing your board down the hill because something either broke or fell off.
Some of the early Sims bindings where if you'd land, both of them would come unbuckled and your snowboard would go flying down the hill.
Like Farm would do, would just drive a nail through a snowboard and then bend it up on the other side.
Era 1986, we started with plate bindings and plastic boots.
We couldn't tweak because the boots were, coming up to your shins and you couldn't bend your ankles.
So it was like this painful progression.
Powder is where it's at. And that's what most of these boards are designed for, POW.
There was people doing stuff in Colorado and definitely in Canada, but it really felt like Tahoe was the main scene.
All of a sudden, everyone started moving to like Tahoe.
The beginning of the whole revolution of snowboarding, Tahoe was one of the main points of it.
That's where the recognition was, because a lot of the filmers, a lot of the progressive riders, I think a lot of people wanted to move out to Tahoe because of that and be a part of this whole scene.
Farm and Perata. Now those are a couple classic characters. And they used to live in Colorado, so I've known them for a long time back when I lived in Breckenridge. They moved from Breck to Tahoe, and I probably should have gone with them, except for I would have gotten in a lot more trouble.
Nick and Shawn were just kind of the grandfathers of snowboarding.
My name's Shawn Farmer. In the beginning, that was what I wanted to be, was a mogul snowboarder. I've been snowboarding about 5 or 10 years.
Farmer is probably the original madman on a snowboard.
Master of disaster.
The most punk rock snowboarder ever. The guy was crazy as hell, and he had the attitude to go along with it.
He was kind of one of the first snowboarders that was larger than life.
He's definitely an idol.
If he respects you, he'll wash his dishes in your house, and if he doesn't, he'll break them all.
I never really dug the early pipes, but that's where the media was, and that's where you had to go if you wanted to be a winner in that venue. I was like, we're doing so much cooler stuff right out here, on the backside of this ridge right here than you're seeing right here in this half pipe that no one even hardly knew. But it was so much more fun for me that I didn't care, so that's how we ran it.
Farm, the fizz. The fizz is the shiz. Farm was my boy back in the day.
Nick Perata and I met in Colorado. I think it was at an event We just started hanging out together and kind of clicked. We got along really well, and our idea was we're gonna throw down sweet lines and jump off big stuff, and we're gonna land and look clean and fast doing it, and that's what happened. The next thing I knew, you know, we were jumping off big stuff and wound up in some films.
The guys I was looking up to were the guys I was riding with, you know, especially Farm. You know, I was really looking up to him because the way he looked at the mountain and the lines he was taking and his aggressive nature of attacking that hill. He was a fearless, fearless snowboarder.
He wasn't really a big mountain rider. He wasn't really a freestyle rider. He was just a rider. There was no classification back then. Shawn Farmer was just a snowboarder, and he was larger than life, and he was one of the best guys out there. Nick was kind of a step ahead of his time as far as the clothing and the stances and the riding. He was definitely one of the first kind of more freestyle riders that I'd seen, and he was always really powerful.
He was one of the first guys to really land stuff. Like, he'd watch his parts, he would stomp everything.
To this day, I've never seen him be able to land cliffs like Nick.
He was a lighter dude, and he always rode a big board, like a 170. You know, I was hitting pretty hard on some of these landings, and Nick would touch down almost like a feather. Couldn't hardly tell when the landing even happened. He would just go from the air to the snow.
Nick and Shawn, they were just an awesome team.
We were inseparable for many years, and the guy was one of the most amazing riders you'll find.
We've come and gone in the industry, but when we go out and ride together as 40-year-olds, he's still pushing it, and he's still seeing things that, you know, probably a 20-year-old wouldn't even go off right now. So Farm's the man. He always has been.
He was great at partying, great at scaring women, and great for the sport.
My name's Nick Perata. The thing I like to do most when I'm not riding the steeps is jibbing.
Yeah, that's right. I think Perata did invent the word jibbing. I don't know anybody else that was jibbing before him.
You're riding on everything that you see in your path. Logs, rocks, anything.
He told me about jibbing, and I did a little jibbing, and next thing you know, there was movies about nothing but jibbing.
All the tricks that we were doing came from skateboarding because nobody was doing them on snowboards yet. You know, we were watching skate videos and trying to transfer those skate moves to our snowboards. And really, I think without skateboarding, snowboarding would have been way, way, way behind. A lot of sick skateboarders turn their skateboarding ability into snowboarding, like Noah Selaznick, for example. I mean, you just watch this guy on a snowboard, and he looks exactly the same as if he's riding a skateboard.
These moves kind of came easy, and I would take my skate moves, my 180s or whatever, and take it to the snow, and it was such a bigger scale, so it was so rewarding back then. It was new. You do a 30-foot 180, like, you know, you don't do that on a skateboard.
We were primarily skaters, and the winters were kind of a lull.
In the beginning, skaters thought, snowboarders were not that cool.
There were the guys that were hardcore skaters, street skaters, that were like, that sport's weak.
It took a while before they got to see someone like Chris Roach and Selaznick, people who were skaters.
It was all skateboarding. That's how it drove me to snowboard. I could go faster, I could go bigger, it was less consequences, it was everything,
And a lot of people went after the Tony Hawk style, and they were much more technical, but I just wanted the big flowing backside airs and nose bones and things like that.
We didn't street skate back then. All we did was skate vert. We built huge ramps, and that was it. And that's where I think my style came from, is skating vertical. I just transferred that over to snow.
The style was changing. It was tightening up, less flounder, and I think a lot of that had to do with the skate influence, and a lot had to do with people pushing themselves on tougher lines and just riding better in the pow and the steeps and stuff.
Jibbing probably came about in, let's say, the early 90s. Skateboarding at the time was kind of into the nose bonks and stuff like that, and snowboarding was definitely leaning more that direction back then. It was taken to the snow. I mean, there was trash cans on the snow, there was boxes, there was rails, and here's everyone trying to literally pretend they're skating on the snow. It was fun at the time, but it was almost just like, hey, let's go try to hit that thing. It's not part of snowboarding, really. It was just kind of fun at the time. Go jib this thing, and it trips me out that it became such a focus now. And, it's so concentrated on rails. And I think it's going to come full circle a little bit, but it's definitely surprises me how much that is such a focus. I think one of the worst crashes I ever saw in snowboarding back in the day was Nick Perata.
When Nick Perata hit his head when we were filming Totally Bored, that was probably one of the first really serious injuries that a pro snowboarder suffered during a film shoot.
Yeah, I was filming for Totally Bored 1, and myself, Mike Hatchett, Dave Hatchett, and a couple other farm might have been there as well. We were in the backcountry at Kirkwood, and we'd hiked in about 2 hours to get to this one little face that we had seen from the road, and we had done a bunch of shots and stuff, and I saw this big patch of dirt coming off a slope, so I came down and went across the patch of dirt about 60 miles an hour thinking, oh man, that was a good shot. And I told him, move the camera here because I'm going to go across the dirt up on the rocks, because the rocks were kind of flat, up on the rocks and then back onto the snow. Because in those days I was like, you got to ride everything you can. You got to ride
logs, rocks, small children,
whatever was in front of you, you were going to ride your snowboard on.
I don't even know what he was thinking, but he came in so hot and heavy into this rock patch.
Doing about 50 miles an hour, nose caught, and just airmailed into some rocks.
Oh no, he's in trouble.
I don't even know what he was thinking, but he came in so hot and heavy into this rock patch.
Doing about 50 miles an hour, nose caught, and just airmailed into some rocks. It knocked me out for a couple days.
It was really scary. We weren't sure whether Nick was going to live or die. He had to get life flighted out of the backcountry.
He was out in a coma, I guess.
Thank God for Mike and Dave Hatchett running to the road, flagging down a police car who just happened to be, coming by. Without those guys, who knows what might have happened to me out there in the middle of nowhere.
That was a real wake-up call for a lot of snowboarders, seeing what could happen, and potentially you seem very invincible and everything's fun and powder, but the rocks are out there, and being a snowboarder and going out and filming, that stuff's in the back of your head. So that was pretty rough to watch.
It really made me aware of what can happen to me, and that was still in my young snowboarding career then, and I really wised up after that and picked and chose my lines a lot more carefully after that one. I think without Mike and Dave Hatchett, the sport of snowboarding would definitely be an empty place right now. These were key characters in the development of snowboarding in Lake Tahoe. They knew snowboarding was going somewhere. Me and my friends, we really didn't. We didn't care. We weren't thinking that far ahead. We were thinking, who's going to pay us next? What cliff are we going to jump off next? Not, you know, in 10 years, am I still going to be doing this? You know, we didn't care about that. We were living for the moment. Dave and Mike really had a vision for the future of the sport. They really took the sport and kind of turned it over to the, you know, free riding is bigger and better than freestyle because we can do the freestyle in these big mountains, and they really showed that. They totally pioneered Donner Pass as far as free riding up there. They spent more time in Donner Pass than any two people I know.
I think Donner Summit was one of the first places we really started to hike and to venture into the backcountry. It's right off Highway 40, super accessible, a lot of good little cliffs there and some little lines, and we used to hike around there and break off some lines, and that actually got super saturated and crowded eventually. But back in the day, that was a nice little nook. Tahoe doesn't have the hugest mountains in the world by all means. It's actually kind of minimal vert. But what you do get is those steep little moments. You know, you get that little, 3-4 turns, which takes you back to feeling like you're in Alaska. But it's those moments that really stoke me in Tahoe and finding those little nooks and crannies. And even though they're short, they're sweet. Stock rock is one to remember. Everyone tried to do what they could off that. That was kind of the standard. What are you going to do off the stock rock?
I think Damien and Graham were some of the first people, if not the first people to ever jump off that. The next generation came along, and then Jim Rippey did a big 180 off it. It was so radical back then. It was an A+ shot. I mean, nowadays it would probably hit the editing room floor because he flapped and tail wheelied, and it was only a 180 and he didn't grab. But when he did it, it was pretty much the sickest thing anyone had ever done off stock rock. Nowadays, I'm seeing 540s, 7s, rodeos, like everyone's doing everything off stock rock now. In the Tahoe backcountry, there's this place at Donner Summit we always go to film. And at this spot, there's this amazing feature called the I-80 drop.
A lot of times, that just happens to be the first thing on the hike out. You hadn't even taken a turn yet, and you're jumping off that thing. You're completely stopped, and you drop in, and within 10 feet, you can take a 40, 50-foot air.
Tahoe's been really inspirational for me in my riding, definitely. Donner's a really key place and big figure in the history of snowboarding.
More than anything, Lake Tahoe back in the early days was the best proving ground that the United States had to offer.
This place is unprecedented as far as the influence it had on the sport.
There was no better place to be.
For those of you out there that only ride park, you're missing out on a huge part of snowboarding. And it's the roots of snowboarding, and it's what snowboarding is to me, and it's what snowboarding is to a lot of people. If you don't ride powder, you're not getting it.